welcome to the Growth Whisperers Podcast, where everything we talk about is related to helping leaders and their teams build enduring, great, really great, amazing, spectacular, goal-achieving, mission-inspiring companies. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm here today with my co-host, like I am every week, Brad Giles from down under in Australia. Brad, how you doing today?
I'm doing much better now that I heard that inspiring introduction. Wow. That was very good. No, I'm doing pretty good. Had a really good. I got 3 strategic planning days this week. I had a good one yesterday where we nailed a flywheel for a client. They've been doing it tough for a few years, and we haven't had the chance to kind of build it, but finally got it done, and it's logical. And it makes sense. And you can see how if we get those things all green, all of those components, that it's going to spin faster. So a bit of a nerdy response compared to, oh, it's a sunny day. But no, I'm doing pretty good, feeling effective. How are you doing?
Well, we do get excited about the work that we get to do, Brad, and helping the companies that we work with and being a part of their success. So I wouldn't call that a nerdy response. I'd call it that's a coach's response. That's proud of the team that he's working with and the things they got accomplished. So it's kind of like getting a win if we were coaching sports.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Thank you. How are you today?
Yeah. You know, I'm great. Actually, it's been a long day. I've already been going for about 12 and a half hours now. It's great. I had a meeting with one of the companies that I work with, and we had a day of debate. We have a whole bunch of things that we're working through, figuring out. And those dates are always efficient in some areas and not efficient in others, but we got a bunch of things really sorted out. And we've got another day of that lined up this month. But anyway, it was a really, really solid day of debate, and we made a few tweaks that really worked, mostly about setting up debates in the future. Because debates are a hard thing, and we'll talk about that today when we're talking about what we got on, which is around strategic thinking and how do you get teams to think strategically. But narrowing the focus to what you're trying to sort out, because you get a bunch of people and it's basically saying, hey, what's your opinion? You can spend all day going in circles, and it's hard to manage. So let's talk about that today. Today, we're going to talk about strategic thinking, and it makes you sound really smart and really important. What are you doing today? I'm doing strategic thinking. And it's one of those words people love to throw around is strategic. And there's other fancy words people like to use, but it's actually really important stuff. So tell me, where are we going to go with this today, Brad?
Look, I think the question that we want to talk about and pull apart is how do you get a leadership team to think strategically, right? Now, why is that important? Because the people on the leadership team spend almost all of their career, all of their time on operations. So if you're a salesperson, you spend all of your time on sales, or ops, you spend all of your time in ops. And then there's this one day or 2 days where you come together and you've got to think strategically. And it's a real challenge because for the first time, many people have never done it before, and they revert back constantly to operational thinking, which is really important when that's what you've got to do. But then you've got to kind of take off that hat and then think strategically. And if it's for the first time, people, we see it so many times, revert back to what they think they should be saying. They think, oh, this is the right thing to do in this environment. I've seen this on Mad Men, or I've seen this on a movie. And it's like, that's not how it works. So what we're digging into today is, how do you get a leadership team to think strategically?
Yeah, and you start off with one of the great things is even understanding what it is and knowing what we're actually trying to achieve. Because if you haven't done it, you don't know what it is. And we've both had the great gift of being involved in a lot of strategic thinking meetings. And really, from my perspective, strategic thinking, most of it is at a high level, 30 or 40,000 feet. What are those big moves you're going to do to accomplish your version of winning in the next 3 to 5 years? In real simple terms, the big moves to ensure you get your version of a win. It's not always about beating a competitor, because there's always competitors, and you don't have to beat them to a pulp. You just want to get your You want the score on the scoreboard that you want. And thinking about that, and thinking 3 to 5 years in the future, again, it sounds easy, but people get caught up in a lot of other tactical things and don't necessarily know what to do. So I think we've kind of got a list of things that we'll go through that are key ingredients for really effective strategic thinking. One of the first ones is having time. And it's one of the reasons that most people can't actually get there, because if you don't have a number of hours, it's very hard to almost to zoom up and get out of the tactical. So, the way that you and I work, recommend people work, is, we generally have a quarterly meeting where we have 2 days to think strategically and tactically. You have an annual meeting where you do much more strategic thinking, which would be generally 2 or 3 days every year. And then your exec team, and even some of the other teams, would have a half a day or a day every month to really work on this stuff. So that's, at a minimum, 12 to 16 days, maybe 18 days a year to really dig into this stuff, in that range, depending on your company and your size and complexity, etc. So having the time to do it, for example, a meeting we're in today, we've got a discussion that we have to have. It's very important to the business. And we spent 15 or 20 minutes today shaping what we think we need to get figured out and defining the question we need to answer, what is the information we need to have the discussion. And now we've set 90 minutes to have that discussion. It'll probably need another 90 minutes the following month. And it probably realistically might need 2 or 3 hours, even on the day we have a plan. So no matter what, 20 minutes to set it up, a bunch of hours in the background, 90 minutes for the initial discussion, and maybe a couple of subsequent discussions until we can agree and make it into a strategic decision. And that's a fair amount of time based on how most people work and operate. And without that time, you're going to be tactical, short term, and not have time to really explore what you need to explore. And for sure, not have the time to get everyone bought into it and aligned to. It's one thing to have a strategy, nothing to have everyone bought into it and rowing in the same direction.
In a business, especially a growth business, there's always things that are happening. This person, we don't know if this person should stay or go. This customer's got an issue. We've got a problem with this particular. There's always things that are happening, and they tend to take precedence without a framework or a structure. I remember there was this engineering company that I was kind of looking at working with, and we kind of danced around a bit. And I said, so tell me, they're a multinational company. They've got offices in the UK, in the Middle East, and here in Australia. And I said, so tell me about your strategic meetings, like your regular. And they said, yeah. So we come together, and so tell me about the agenda. And it was all operational. There wasn't one single component because they never had the chance to come together as directors. There was directors in each country and actually build us. They didn't have that. And that's clearly why we were talking. But so often you see that. It's just these meetings are dominated. So I like to kind of begin, once we've set a lot of the engagement, once we've set a lot of the disciplines, such as we need to meet regularly, we need to have a rhythm, and we need to measure some things. I start with this article called "What is Strategy" by Michael Porter. And I get all of the leaders to do that, because this is the thing that you and I and many advisors and coaches around the world come across so often, which is often these people have never really even contemplated that. So this sets a good watermark to say, well, let's just define what strategy is. And one of the great statements I love in that is that strategy is not operational effectiveness, because that's what people think. Right? Strategy is not operational effectiveness. So you can be good at something, and you may come together and think, you know what, we've got to be the fastest to market. Well, that's just operational effectiveness. It's not strategy. So strategy, using that Michael Porter definition, is getting a unique and valuable position in the market that is different from the competition. So then when we look at that, all of the things that we're doing at a leadership team level is about trying to get this unique and valuable position in the market that is different from the competition. And people on the leadership team have never thought like that before. They've always thought in terms of operational effectiveness.
Yes. And when you're in the middle of the day-to-day and the firefighting and operational effectiveness, it also brings a mentality of limitation, scarcity, and you're often more in a survival kind of mode, just trying to keep up with the machine. Those aren't great ingredients for strategic thinking of what's possible and how could we, and a prime example I'll share, and this is a version of strategic thinking, but I was with a company, this is in the US a few years back, and we had just done a major acquisition, a very important, expensive, major acquisition. And the team was absolutely burnt out. I mean, they were grinding that operational effectiveness wheel and trying to, they were really tired. And we had a bunch of the team contribute to the strategic thinking for the coming year. Most of them were talking about how we needed to strengthen the team, give the team a chance to recover, team to catch a breather so they didn't burn out. Well, that was very nice thinking and very practical thinking. But when we looked at it, we had just spent a bucket load of money to buy our biggest competitor with clients on both sides that probably wouldn't be happy about this because we've been selling against each other for so damn long. The most important decision was to keep the damn customers.
Yeah.
And we needed to focus on the customers, and then secondarily find team to breathe some oxygen energy. So find a way to breathe some oxygen into the team. But the tactical, logical thinking would be to take care of the team. But the strategic thinking zooms out of your existing circumstance, and this is the key. You got to get out of your existing circumstance to have perspective and to think about it without the limitations and conflicts and strains and duct tape and all this other weird red tape, and make the right decision for the growth of the business. And that is not easy for a lot of people to do. So our responsibility, one outside of time, is to create the mental context to help people to get there. So as an example, in the meeting we're in today, awesome group, and we were getting a little bit more tactical and kind of stuck in it. So I just changed the question. And there's lots of versions. You could probably come up with a better one, Brad. But the question I said is, hey, if we weren't in the business and we were on the team leading this, and we happened to be in 10 other countries, so this is a large group, and we were just looking at one division being us, what are the strategic outcomes you're going to tell them to drive to be successful? Like zoom way out, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 feet. The conversation changed a bit.
I'll bet.
Because instead of being the people in there doing the work and running on a treadmill, we got them perspective, and we're able to think about it instead of being the person that has to shovel the load of gravel that's sitting on the road. They were thinking about it from very, very different perspectives. And so that's about setting the right context or the right view to it to help people get into a strategic mindset and not get lost in the scarcity or the tactics that you're in.
And they may be quite an experienced leadership team. If they're making that type of acquisition, they're probably a really experienced leadership team. So it's not their first rodeo, right? They've done this thing before.
Or rodeo, yes.
Or it couldn't, but also it might not be their first rodeo.
Yes.
If that's the case, it's even a struggle with established teams. So when a new person joins, like this is an ongoing challenge. And to be honest, part of the value in a catalyst, in a person outside of the leadership team who can step in and hasn't been in the thick of it and look at things through a different perspective. But let's not get down that path. We've got to always think, how can we get the team to think strategically when it's time to think strategically? But even so, when it's not time, so in the 13 weeks of execution, which is the quarter, don't get distracted by the shiny objects that are strategy. Focus all of your strategic thinking into the 1 or 2 days per quarter, and then have 13 weeks of execution.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point there, Brad, is that it's hard sometimes when you're in the middle of it. And a metaphor that I use with strategy is, it's like if there's a fire burning in the back parking lot, everyone's gonna want to run out there with a hose or a bucket of water and put it out. It takes incredible discipline to say call 911 or whatever the number is for your local fire department, or to let the people working out back deal with it and not run out to help them put out the fire. Now, if there's a school bus on fire full of children, different scenario. I'm just talking, the dumpster's on fire out in the back of the building. And that's what happens with this stuff, is that what we're really asking you to do is say, yeah, I know there's a fire out back. There is. And you need to put your blinders on and think about the enterprise we want to build 3 or 5 years down the road. And to not get sucked into that is hard. Now, if you have an amazing team with clear accountabilities and a well-running business, hey, it's easier. By the way, that you've got an amazing team and clear accountabilities and other things dialed in when you have, and you can easily, and you listen to Brad and I go, well, this isn't hard to think strategically. I do it every day. I'm not worried about the dumpster fire out back because I got a team that handles that. That's an indication that you have the right setup. So having your team dialed in truly helps. It helps with both the time and the mindset piece of it.
I've got this awesome slide that I show every workshop, every quarter, every annual. It's about like the 4th or 5th slide at the beginning of the day. And to your point, imagine it's a black and white photo from like the 1940s, and it's an American football game where all of the players are facing each other and crouching down. And then you look sort of beyond them. It's on a football field, obviously. Then there's like the college 3-story dorm room that's fully on fire. Like the flames are reaching 2 stories above it.
Awesome.
And all of the fire trucks are spraying water onto the burning building, and these guys have still got to play football. And so it's funny that you use the burning dumpster in the back lot. It's just this great context of, and I've got this word focus at the bottom, and I say, look, here's the thing. You've got to focus. It doesn't matter what's happening in the background. We now walk into 13 weeks of execution, focus, forget about what's happening in the background. That's how you win. Because at that game, one of those teams would have won, and it would have been the team that focused the most and didn't get destroyed by the burning building, like, I don't know, 50 meters, 100 meters behind them.
Yeah, please send me that picture, Brad. That sounds awesome. But that's true in any endeavor. I always talk about in the world of racing or go-karting, right? Or even, I'm sure, for those that are cyclists and cycle race, anything. Even for example, in the world of car racing, when you get up behind somebody else and you're trying to pass them, if they start looking in their mirror, you got them. Yeah. Because they get distracted and they're gonna make a mistake. I was on the track once when I was getting my race license, and let's just say a young guy flattened and smoothed out the whole side of his car up against a concrete wall because he wasn't gonna let me by. And a couple other guys by, and he started watching his mirrors, and he got distracted. Instead of focusing on what matters most, he ended up hitting the wall and smoothing out his car. And that's what that's about. And for a lot, in any endeavor, you have got to be, with the noise and the distraction, all that other stuff, you got to be able to focus on winning, right? And not the problems. And that is a serious competency that is required in order to be able to do this. And we're not saying it's easy. So to be able to stay focused on what matters most. And that's true even tactically on achieving goals, that same skill. But for strategic thinking, you have to be able to set the fires aside. So let's talk, Brad.
Let's just draw on that. How do we stay focused both on the strategic planning day and through the quarter? It's the framework, it's the tools, right? And I think that's what you were about to get onto is how do we do that? And it's the tools that we use during the quarter, things like the weekly meeting or the daily huddle, and the KPIs and a lot of those things that we use through the quarter when we're not doing strategic thinking that ensures we remain focused and we have the best chance of execution. I got one client, and after many attempts and fails, they said, "Oh, Brad, so what you're saying is we've just got to follow the recipe." And I'm like, "Yep, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
You just got to, like, this is it. This you've just got to follow the framework." The human mind loves to be creative and dance out in all these different ways. Just capitulate to the system, and it will deliver the results that you want.
Right. So that's about having the right conversations at the right time, and in some degree, trusting the system. So we've got a daily meeting where we talk about today's things and staying focused. We have a weekly meeting where we review our tactical goals, quarterly goals. We've got a monthly meeting where we zoom out and get strategic and look at the big picture. Quarterly meeting, strategic and tactical with the wider team. Annual meeting, full on strategic. But having and knowing that have the right conversation at the right time, just knowing, oh, today's a strategic day. I set aside my tactical and let's get strategic. Again, easy to say, hard to do, which takes me to the next piece, which is what are the questions or the frameworks that we can use? So, in this one-page strategic plan that we use, there's some pieces in there that help. But I'd like to start with some of the strategic thought questions or the strategic thought content that helps. And the one that I think is the most important, and I've been through with many companies, as we mentioned last week, that have been through industries that have been disrupted or industries that have had major change. And the one thing is thinking about the trends that are impacting your business. Yeah. And when you connect people with trends, and basically it's said differently, instead of saying, oh, this is cool stuff happening, it's like, what's coming at us that's going to force us to change? So exercises around trends are extremely powerful to help set off the right thought process on strategic thinking.
Yeah, I begin with the core customer. And don't get me wrong, I will step straight to trends as well. Like, I think that's one of the first 2 or 3 things, but I'll begin with core customer every single time. Who is your ideal customer? And I'm going back to the context of today's call, because we've got to get people out of that operational mindset. Yep. Who's your ideal customer? And then some people say, look, I'm in sales. Like, I want everyone to be our customer. And, I'm kind of like, well, that's good, but are there any customers that you'd prefer to not deal with? And they go, well, absolutely. Look, there's always some. Like, this person was a pain in the butt. This person, we ended up in court, or, like some bad examples. Okay, well, what about the best customers? So how do we replicate the best customers? Right. Because those people will pay more profit, and that's what matters. The best customers will pay more. And that if we can meet the best customers' needs, and by following that thought process down, what we're able to do is then say, identify who's the core customer, or stress test or talk about the needs of that core customer. That's where I kind of begin, because then we can build a strategy. Because if you can't build your business around your core customer, you need to find a new core customer.
For sure. And for companies that have the core customer figured out, some of the mid-sized companies are really clear on that, some aren't. But then the other piece is, well, but which ones are we making money off of? So that's another input so you might love working with a certain customer segment, but when you go do a profit analysis by customer, you find out, well, your love is a labor of love. It's not a for-profit part of your business, and understanding where you really make the money sometimes can also be shocking, but also helps you with it. So you move the business not to where it feels good, but to where it actually gets stronger and is more profitable too.
And that's exactly what I agree. That's exactly what I said. Like, will this person pay more profit if you meet their needs better than any other organization? Like that forms the kind of foundation. And so, for example, in coronavirus, what I was doing was adapting that in our planning sessions, saying, well, how does coronavirus impact our core customer? Are they going to pay more or less, or what happens to our core customer in this environment? And how do we deal with that? What do we do about that? So I kind of begin with that, and then we're moving towards, the market forces, the trends, talking about those types of things, and how is that going to affect this next quarter, next year, in 3 years, thinking about that, because, and trying to get a bit more of a nuanced response to that, if that makes sense, trying to get people to have conversations with customers or suppliers, and to get, rather than just, oh, you know what's changing in our market? Social media. Or, you know what's changing in our market? Coronavirus. Like, just the big things that they probably learned from the media.
Yep.
Trying to get a bit more distilled information around that.
So, in many of the companies that we will actually go to, the core customers, profitability, and what are our customers saying? So customer data or customer feedback, which gets into some of the things you're talking about what's changing. So that's one piece that takes people, one, to be connected to the boss anyways. So it helps for good thinking and strategic thinking, because the customer is who we're trying to serve. What are the other things? I got a number of other ones. But what are the other things, the questions or the things that you get people to discuss or look at that helps set people up for good strategic thinking?
Well, I guess predicating it on this statement before around what is strategy, predicating it on our objective is to not become a commodity in the marketplace. It's to have a unique and valuable position.
Yes.
Then thinking, understand the customer, understand the trends. Well, where are the opportunities? Like, if we meet the customer's needs, what are the attributes of the market, and where are the opportunities in the market that no one else is meeting our core customers' needs better than us? And this is not about competing to be the best, it's competing to be unique. Trying to find where can we excel at, and where can we not excel at? Trying to find the difference between us and the others. If that is the strategy, if that is the definition of strategy, where is the opportunity, first of all?
Yeah, and one of the things, I'm going to quickly show a visual here, Brad, of the image that I use all the time.
We're breaking new ground here. Awesome.
I am. Watch this. So for those of you that are watching the YouTube, you can see this. And Brad, if you can enable screen sharing, you blocked me out. It says the host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay.
I don't have right. Okay, let me just make sure. There we go. So what we have here is, can you see this clearly on your screen? This is from an HBR article. Can you say what your strategy is? And you're describing this. This is what I ground people in terms of strategy. This is context, the outer circle, their technology, industry, regulations, etc. Your customer needs are here. Your competitors' offerings are here, and your capabilities are here. It doesn't mean, so I'm just showing you is that it's a Venn diagram that overlays what your customer needs, what your competitors give, and what you're capable of. And your sweet spot's this beautiful place where in your customer's eyes, you fulfill one of their needs, whether it's emotional or practical, better if it's emotional. And you're seen to be the only person that can do that. And it's interesting, when we do strategy in businesses, you said not be a commodity, which drives people right into the center, which is called, I call commodity hell.
Yeah.
Where as you, in your desire to get more sales and listening too much to your salespeople or too much to your customers or whatever it happens to be, or too much to yourself, you go right into the middle, right into where your competitor offers pretty well the same thing. Not only does your margins and profitability go down, but your customer loyalty goes down, right? And you really hurt your business. And the key in strategy is to keep us in our sweet spot where we can do something that essentially the customer will either pay a premium for in terms of dollars or in terms of their loyalty, and seeing you as the only game in town. And that's why I love to watch the gross margin number as companies grow to tell us whether we're sticking in that sweet spot or we're fading. And many times there's different moves you have to make to continue to enhance it. But without the right strategic context, many people chase sales volume, which will take them into the middle, and they basically lose context. And they're good people. They don't even realize it because they don't have the right kind of framework to help them with that thinking.
They don't. And so when you're in commodity hell, first of all, many of the people who either are new to a leadership team or people who spend all of their time thinking in terms of execution, they wouldn't know commodity hell, the impacts of that. So what is that? If you build your business model around commodity hell, what does it do to the value of the organization? Like, it limits you to like a 2.5 times multiple if you were going to sell, right?
Depending on the size, but it limits the value because it limits the profitability. And people generally don't go out excited to pay big money for commodity businesses unless it's someone like a Walmart or another organization that has truly leveraged it. But again, Walmart has its own distinct sweet spot, right? They and just like Amazon became master logistics companies more than anything. But it's very limiting. And the thing is, if you listen, what I found to most people who haven't had an opportunity to learn a lot about strategy and strategic thinking, what they will do is they will have a lot of ideas of seeing what the competitors do and what the customer feedback says. And they inadvertently want to take care of the customer and commoditize the business because they don't realize that doing everything your competitor does is a horrible freaking idea.
Yeah.
Because if you do everything your competitor does and everything your customer asks you to do, which usually comes from their experience with similar competitors, you make yourself just exactly the same as the other businesses. So then you commoditize yourself, and then your customers go, "Oh, you're just like everyone else." And you're like, "Duh, you told us to." Well, you really, and this is where I say about competitors and customers and even employee feedback. You only listen with one ear. The other ear stays tuned into your strategy. And it's so unless you understand that and you realize that being the same is lethal, then you will you commoditize and destroy your own business.
There's an interest. That's really interesting. I've got a kind of a concept that I work with clients. And if this is specifically for B2B, business to business clients, and that is, so who's the enemy in this market? And they'll say, "Oh, it's competitor A. You know, we come up against them all the time." And I say, "Well, would you entertain the concept that you could be wrong?" And they go, "Okay, let's see what this person is going to say." And then I say, "Well, what if the enemy is actually the tenders department of our biggest customer?" Okay, because the job of the tenders department in a B2B environment, their sole job is to commoditize the market. We're going to write a tender that makes everybody the same. Okay, so the salespeople are often like, "No, our job is to sell to the tenders department. We need to build relationships with them," and so forth. And this is the dichotomy between always thinking execution-wise and thinking strategically, right? This is the line in the sand. And so, okay, so therefore, if our job is, if the definition of strategy is to build a unique and valuable position in the market that is different from our competition, and then you extend that thought, and then you come back to, okay, so who is the enemy? It's not the competition. They're just other players on the field. The enemy is actually the people who are trying to commoditize us. Therefore, how do we win? We win if we're upsetting the tenders department. And then that's when the salespeople in the room, no disrespect to them, they do a great job, they tend to throw a pen at you or something like that. But it's like, we're upsetting them for good reason, because they're like, we can't get these people to be the same. I want to have 5 tenderers where they're beating each other to death with price, and we're getting the lowest price and the highest quality and all of those things that the tender people think about. But from a strategic perspective, we want them to do the other. We want them to say, I can't find anyone who's going to do what they want, and we want exactly their service. We have to pay what they say.
Yes. And there are companies who do really well in tenders. They're few. I've worked with tons of companies who've had a tendering portion, and there are companies who know how to make money on those. Normally, it's by the change orders or the add-ons afterwards. So but there are people who have that. But for most, they lose their shirt when it comes to tenders. They don't do well, because you're right. It's almost like it's the commodity pricing department. I had one client that in one of their softwares, their big ERP softwares, there was a thing in there that enabled reverse auctioning for your vendors. So they went and picked all the categories where it was commodity-ish. The savings were almost embarrassing. Like they saved a lot of money. Now, from the vendor perspective, they were just getting beat up and commoditized. From the client or company perspective, saved a lot of money on commodity-like services. So and it's like, shame on us if we become that, unless we have another way to make money. And with other companies that we work with, every industry has its own version of tendering and what that looks like. But other companies we work with, we come up with strategies, is that once they get to a certain point, then we probably don't want to deal with them, and we go find the middle-sized ones who haven't got to the size of tendering yet, or what we call spreadsheet buyers, and to go and find those ones, because we can make way more money. But yeah, I think that's a great example. That is the commodity creation department, right? They're trying to commoditize
That's their job.
And that it is their job. And unfortunately, if you've been on both sides of those transactions, they often think they have false savings in some cases, because yes, they get a great low number, but they miss on all kinds of maybe that they're doing their job, and that's fine. So let's look at,
just to close that out, relationships is like primary school or kindergarten. Okay, so salespeople would look at that from an execution only lens and say, we've got to build a relationship so that we can get on the tender list, and then we can bid, and then we can win. Okay. But if you want to go to high school or college or university type thinking, that's strategy. And that is, no, we want the customer to say, we can't use our tender. Our tender process won't work because we know we have to deal with you because your unique and valuable position in the market. We only want to deal with you. And that's really the crux of the question that we're saying. How do we get a leadership to think like that?
Yes. And it might be the right thing to do tenders and find out how to make 25, 35% margin on the things you do, the change orders or the additions to the tender afterwards. There's lots of different ways, but it's to realize what do we do to stay out of commoditization and continue to win? Because when you're in commodity hell or in a commodity space, you're fighting over pennies, and it's harder. And we're trying to stay in the places where you're supplier of choice, high demand, and it's a more profitable transaction for you, and the customer can benefit from your great service and not someone who's been ground down to the lowest margin. So let's look at some of the other questions that we use. Like one of the ones that I love, and another company I work with had a great list of questions, but one of them is that, my favorite is, so if we were competitors, how would we take us out? Right? Now that zooms up, and I mean, you see who the devious thinkers are in the room.
Yeah.
But truly thinking about how would you take us out and either minimize or destroy our business if you were a competitor. I think that's a great strategic question to help people to get there.
And what kind of answers do you get to that question? What do people typically say without maybe speaking out of school?
Yeah, I mean, it would be like taking a weakness that we have and really, prying on that. I mean, you hear all kinds of things, like from price wars to trying to learn more about us, taking away key people, taking away key partners, finding a way to do a couple of, to get some business at very low margin, just to get a foot in the door, and then expanding back to normal pricing in the future.
Yeah.
All kinds of things. But what it does is it just puts you on the other side of the wall and has you think very differently and give you some perspective on your own business.
And then what? So you've done that exercise, you've brainstormed that with the team, and you've got oh, these are the 20 things that we would do if we were competitors. What happens next? Does that lead to like a defensive mindset or some priorities that come out of that to protect the business, or how
So,
do you use that then?
yeah. So I have a whole bunch of different questions and things. Generally, in a perfect annual planning, and they're all very different depending on a customer and what they have. In a perfect annual planning, we have 6 or 8 major packages of information. They can be very succinct, like one-pagers, that we would review before we review our 3-year plan and set our 1-year goals as part of an annual planning process.
Yeah.
So we would look at, so basically you review and soak your brain into all of this strategic content, right? You're up at 30, 40, 50,000 feet. Then you go, okay, with that in mind, let's think about what the next 3 years looks like and we need to achieve. And then dropping down into the years. So it's like strategic fertilizer to get people into the right mental framework before we start making decisions about our plans. So, and usually what we like to do with all of them is that, and often we do this in some bigger groups. Say there's 15 people, break up into 3 or 4 groups. People come up with a list and present their top 3 and why. And we take those top 3s, put them on the master sheet, whether it's digitally or in the room, for consideration when we formulate the rest of the plans.
And that touches on a really important point. So the leadership team aren't thinking strategically normally, or they've come from a background where they don't think strategically. And then they're walking them through this process that has to have boundaries, right? We've got to use tools or else people begin to think about crazy things. So we're walking them through this process with tools that help to get them to the right position where ultimately they believe that this is going to give us a unique and valuable position in the market. It's going to pursue the opportunity, but also it's worth doing on the way to our big, hairy, audacious goal. And then out from that, we're setting out the 3-year and the 1-year type priorities or thrusts, whatever we want to call them, or differentiators. And then from that, really what we want to do is get people to walk away with confidence that in that process, they're going to be working on the right things. I think that's a really important outcome, because they don't normally do it. They don't normally think like that. If we can get them confident, I think that's a really important outcome to touch on.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those things that would contribute into the strategic thinking. At the end of the day, it boils down into your 3-year plan, which is your numbers you're going to hit, and your key investments, key goals, key projects, key differentiators, whatever you want to call it, but a handful of projects, and same for the year. And there's lots of different ones. One of my favorites, and we'll talk about this one in a future episode, we could talk about all of them, but is Jim Collins' flywheel. It's a very powerful concept from his monograph called Turning the Flywheel. And it is a strategic thinking tool that is outstanding if you want to continue to build and scale your business. So that is one of 20 different ones we might use. What are some of the other ones that you think that can really help with people thinking in the right place?
Well, understanding where we want to get at a certain point. So when we talk in terms of 3 years, what do we want the business to look like? Yeah, we've got the financial metrics, we've got some of those things, but moreover, how will we be in the market? How will we serve the customer's needs better than anyone else? And they're getting more and more clarity around that, and then really kind of walking backwards from that, so that there is alignment between that and the 1 year. So we can see a really clear path between the two, because often what happens is people set a 90-day plan, which is effectively based around the way the wind is blowing in the business right now, the things that are happening. And then they set a 3-year plan, which is rooted in optimism and, gee, it would be nice if we could do this. And everyone many people would leave that and think, yeah, that'd be nice to do that, but let's just get back to the way the wind's blowing right now. And everything falls back to that, because that's the way their mind has been trained to work over their whole career.
That's what their day is filled with.
So we want to have real clarity between the 3 year and the 1 year and the 90 days. So we can see, just like the flywheel, if we do that, then we do that, then we do that, like this will compound the momentum of our growth. I think that answered your question.
You did, Brad. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. And you know, a couple of other things that that are really powerful in that is having people think about what in an ideal scenario, if we hit a home run every single year over this next 3 to 5 years, what would it look like? And that's you touched on that, but it's really getting them thinking to possibility and getting out of the constraints that they're in. It is a really powerful starting point, because when you get a whole team aligned around that possibility and what it could be and what it could be like, it can be really inspiring and really engaging for them. You know, you can get to the how and the tactical piece, but them really getting excited about that next mountain that you're going to climb together can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm. So let's begin to think about wrapping up. So the question we're posing today is strategic thinking. How do you get a leadership team to think strategically? So we've got, first of all, understanding, and fill me in where you can. We've got, first of all, understanding that people don't normally think strategically. Kind of going off-site, making sure it's off-site, which we didn't really touch on, but that's definitely one thing. And then using the boundaries of tools, so set and structured tools, ideally with an external person, to be able to walk people through this process so that they can come up with the right outcomes. And then revisiting that with the right tools on a regular basis. What have I missed on that? How do we get leadership team to think strategically?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it's having the time, the luxury of time to allow the mind to kind of wander and go off in some of these strategic directions. Yeah. And then some sort of stimulus input that gets them actually to a different place or a different plane. Yeah. Right. And we talked about that through questions. The other thing that we've actually done, I didn't mention, but is sometimes doing field trips and going and visiting other businesses. You know, one of the meetings that we did in Denver, by the way, we got the head of, we did two things. We went and had a meeting at Zach Brown's music studio. So in a different environment of someone who was a best-selling country artist, and in his studio learning how they produce country music, and hearing from the head of the business development arm of the town. And hearing, this was, I said, no, it wasn't Denver. What was the town? I just said,
Denver.
Not Denver. No, it was the country music town. What's that one?
The
name will come back. Yeah, exactly. I'm asking
Australian. We don't do country music.
No, I know. The name, I can picture the city in my mind. Nashville,
Tennessee. Yep.
Nashville. And we had the head of business development to come. So basically you get some new thoughts coming in. He talked about the strategy of building Nashville and growing Nashville. It was outstanding. So sometimes having other people come in or other perspectives come in, that becomes, again, going back to the fertilizer for the brain to kind of help with that.
Awesome.
Okay, so the this in summary, and we're up. But in summary is how do you create the environment where people who don't normally do it, or who people who are great at strategic thinking can do their best strategic thinking, and it doesn't happen naturally, right? Yeah. It needs a bit of help, needs models, needs time, needs environment, and sometimes needs permission to have some crazy ideas.
Awesome. So hopefully we've helped you today. Hopefully we've helped you to think about how do we get a leadership team to think strategically. And thank you so much for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Brad Giles, joined as always by Kevin Lawrence. For the video version, you can obviously go to YouTube and see Kevin's great Venn diagram. Maybe worth tuning in just for that, maybe not. But for the podcast, you can find us at all good places where podcasts are found, obviously. So to reach myself, Brad, you can go to evolutionpartners.com.au. For Kevin, it's lawrenceandco.com. Thanks very much for listening, and have a great week. Look forward to hearing from you next week.